So I am here once again with Radhika Rao. It is wonderful to speak with you again. We were just chatting for like 10 or so minutes before we press and record, and they were like, no, we're talking about all these fun things, and you've been up to loads of cool things, and there's some questions I want to ask about you. So how are you doing? And why don't you tell us what you've been up to recently?
Yes, thank you, Mike. It's so exciting to be back and just chat. I'm actually coming off of we were just talking about this doing quote unquote doing nothing.
Mm.
And I went back to see my family in India after 3.5 years. The last time I saw them was February 2019. And I went back after 3.5 years and I slept. I spent time with my family. I met friends. I ate good food. I spoke more Hindi than I've spoken, in a while. And it was just really wonderful. And then I came back and I guess I must have had some divine knowledge because people ask me why I came back for the Thanksgiving break. So I'm in the US where, the last week of November is usually off time. And, I say, so I came back right before Thanksgiving and I, you know, I had basically jet lag, a cold, and I'm going to say like mild to moderate depression that I was coming
Oh,
back to
wow.
the US, but also, when I left, it was October and the days weren't that short and it wasn't that cold. And I come back and suddenly the day is remarkably shorter because the time changes. The time had changed and it's so much colder. So for 10 days, I nursed this cold, jet lag, and depression. But now I'm doing really good. So I've literally had a month and a half of doing nothing and my brain is much happier now. So thank you for asking. Yeah.
It's so good to have like a reset. It's one of those things
It's
that
a
like
reset.
we were chatting beforehand, and like in the UK, a lot of US listeners may not know this. Now the other listeners may not know, but the US is one of the only countries in the sort of the first world or the Western world, one or the other, that doesn't have mandatory paid vacation. Whereas the UK has one of the highest mandatory. I think it's around 20 days on average off a year plus bank holidays if you work a standard 40-hour a week job generally. And often people get more than that. So it's like the difference in UK is like at Christmas, it's like Christmas and Boxing Day, which is the day after Christmas, the 26th, which we get both of those off. And if they're on a weekend, then you get the next 2 weekdays off. So sometimes on Christmas, like this year and last year, is on a weekend, we actually get like 4 days off. It's brilliant. And it's really about, just doing whatever you want at Christmas. That's the kind of thing. And so that's kind of what spiraled into the conversation to a degree. And it's just taking that time is so important, especially when you're someone as busy as yourself or me, not just
Yeah.
either if you're self-employed or doing sort of a lot of other projects.
It's so good. And I think we're resetting from a whole year, but I also think for me, I was resetting for 3.5 years. I was
Mm.
resetting from 3.5 years of just kind of being wired and not getting a break and not, seeing family. And I think that reset is so important. And now I
Hmm.
can dream bigger dreams and do stuff. Yeah, I like Christmas also because it's not like my family's holiday, so I don't have to buy any presents. I mean, sometimes I will for a few people, but it's a stress that people take on in the US. I don't know what it's like in England, but I don't have that stress. So I can just take the time off and I don't have to work hard for it. And there's no family drama on my end. So it's good.
That's brilliant. Well, over here, it's normally you do give gifts and things, but I don't think
Right.
they're as extravagant usually as the US is. But
Right.
it's more so about the food. It's about we have basically the equivalent of Thanksgiving, that kind of a turkey, and then maybe some other meat and roast potatoes, and we have pigs and blankets and kind of lots of sort of vegetables and things like that as well. That's a big part of it. And then the next day you have kind of the leftovers and stuff, and a lot of
Nice.
different families do it in different ways. Some of them put them in sandwiches, some of them just eat them the way they are, reheat them, make all kinds of stuff with them. But I want to ask, with India, before we delve into the more
Yeah.
spiritual and philosophical side of some of our conversations, with India, what do you kind of get up to? Obviously, you said you spent time with family and things, but was it just like, how long were you there for? The kind of normal day? Was it just get up, eat, and let your family kind of take you where, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's because this time it depends on the trip.
Mm.
And every time I like to go somewhere, so I'm from Delhi, which is the capital, and millions and millions of people. And it's also has the unique now dishonor of being the most polluted city in the world. We
Hmm.
overtook Beijing, which is, we're thrilled, to usually beat China in something, but unfortunately, we're beating China on air pollution. And so it's just a crazy city. And so I try to always get away. And so this time I did get away to Hyderabad, which is where a lot of my family is extended, some of my extended family is in. But mainly I did want to stay in Delhi because I was seeing my parents after so long. And I usually want to go see every friend, acquaintance, make new friends. But this time I just stayed home more because my mother still works. She's in her 70s, but she still works as a doctor. And so her days are she's not at home during the day, but she'll come back in the afternoon. But my father's home, all day. So I just wanted to just be at home and just hang out. But I ended up sleeping so much. And it's just jet lag. That trip is a lot.
Mm.
And it's jet lag and it's culture lag, and you're suddenly like, oh wow, I'm here, and I know it, but I don't know it. And then India just happens to you. Have you been there ever?
No, no, I haven't actually. I've not been to Asia. I've been to quite a few places in Europe. I've been to Mexico and I've been to Iceland, which is kind of still
Oh,
Europe, but I've not really been outside of Europe, if I'm honest with you.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to go to Iceland.
It's
So,
incredible. My favorite place in the whole on the whole world. It is my favorite. The air is so clean, and just in the pollution thing, Southampton, which is where I live, is one of the most polluted cities in the UK because we have a very big dock and lots of cars, incredibly densely populated. We're one of the only cities that's a city because of the population. In England, if it's a town and it has a cathedral, it becomes a city. But ours was so big and doesn't have a cathedral, it was like you're just a city. It's massive. It's huge, and we've got one of the highest percentage of traffic lights as well per square mile outside of London. So it's just like there's just stopped cars everywhere, and docks with loads of big like cruise ships and things like that, and container ships. It's very polluted. So when I went to Iceland, I was like, oh my god, the air tastes different. It's like when you get really,
yeah.
really good water from somewhere that's got like a really nice spring, and you're like, but it's like that, but with breathing.
I need to thank you for reminding me. I need to put Iceland on my goals because one of the things that happened in the pandemic was I really said, I want to travel.
Mm.
And so I definitely want to go there. But with India, usually I try to get away. But this time I was just, there. And India, so yes, what I was saying was India happens to you. You just get, and so, people call, you just have to tell people you're in town. And then, I grew up there. So people just want to come and meet. And it was Diwali season.
Mm.
So I went for Diwali. And
Amazing.
so a lot of their Diwali festival is kind of the big Christmas. It's like the Christmas there. So there was a lot of just festival stuff, these Diwali melas, which are, these little like markets that get set up just for that time. And so yeah, it was all of that. And this time, this was the first time I went as a US citizen. So I switched my citizenship, and unfortunately, India doesn't allow dual citizenship. So I had to give up my Indian citizenship. But I'm going to apply for permanent residency in India. Um, but I was also able to meet with a lot of folks, and talk about working there, as a U.S. citizen and working in India in education and in the arts. And I do have a lot of connections there. So it was a lot of some professional dialogue as well. So it was great. And I did grow up with asthma, and when the air quality index is like above 300, like yes, I need to use my inhaler. So that was not the most joyful part
Mm.
of it, but yes, I was like sometimes I was struggling to breathe in my country. It's actually horrific. So they're trying to figure it out. It has to do with crop burning that happens in the winter, which has to do with capitalism. Like, why would you burn like wheat or crops? And I don't quite understand it, but it's easily solvable. And so I think when you go to another country, you get involved in its politics. So there was, all of that, like dealing with air pollution, violence that's happening there. And then in the midst of all of that, Rishi Sunak became the prime minister. So all of India is like, that's big news. Uh, you know, even though he's like, there's generations, you can trace it right back to, many, many, many generations because he's through Africa. But everybody's so excited about that. And, so it was just fun. And like you were saying about England, like, as opposed to America, like people do just chill out more. I don't know even if they're poor and their circumstances aren't great, there's something more relaxed about the energy. It isn't as, what's the word? Like really angsty. I'm gonna say America is just, we're
It's like
full of
tense.
angst, you know?
There's a lot of
Huh?
tense. Like
Tense.
you've got your shoulders up, and you can't just go,
It's
you know.
yeah, it's just it's more tense. And I think we even take comedy more seriously, and everything is, I think it's built off like the DNA is that everybody left the country to make something of themselves, including myself. And so I think we all have this in our DNA to just be that tense and wired.
Like on everything 110% of the time, or like 150%. It's always push further, go more. It's like,
Yeah,
we're land of the free. If you've got an opinion, go full hog with
yeah,
it. Whereas a lot of other countries, they kind of, for one reason or another over the history, have learned to rein it in to a
yeah,
degree. Not all the time. There are lots of loudmouth 150% people in the UK. Don't get me wrong. It's not just
yeah.
an America
Of
thing, but I
course.
think, as you say, the DNA of how it's built and why people go over there, and a combination of everything that makes America America. One of the things that makes it amazing is also one of the follies of America. It's meant to
Yeah,
be anyone's welcome. You can kind of be who you want to be in
right.
theory, and
In
then it,
theory.
it skews as you go into the details, really.
It's yeah, I mean that's about it. It's a new country, even though it's one of the in terms of democracies, it's one of the older democracies, but it's a new country. It's a new country. And I think everybody else is just older and more chilled out. It's like I spent Thanksgiving morning with my two friends, one of whom is 80 and the other's 92.
Wow.
And they're super chilled and they've had good lives and they're relaxed. And I think that's what, India feels like, or, Europe feels like. You've been there for several centuries, and America's still that angsty teenager, that's trying to prove themselves, or. And so it's real. That's why I just need to get away. But it was really great. So I don't even know what I did, but I just reconnected to my country, I think would be, and food is such a big part. I ate good food.
I love Indian food. It's my favorite. That, along
Oh,
with Mexican food, because obviously English culture, because of colonization and us going over there and
of
basically
course.
stealing
Yes.
so much of your culture and people. But then eventually over time, I don't know the specifics of it, but I know a lot of people who live in India can just apply and get citizenship in the UK a lot easier
Oh,
than
if you have a family,
yeah.
some kind of history.
Yeah, I can't
Oh,
remember if that was previously, and there was a period of time that everyone was kind of allowed in if they were from India, or what the specifics were. I just know that that was a thing. And so Indian culture, like British, the number one voted British dish is a chicken tikka masala, which isn't an Indian dish. It's a dish created for English people, but because it's a
right.
curry, and we have curry houses everywhere, and so many people I talk to, your favorite meal is curry. And Indian individuals, I think, are more prevalent in certain places in the UK than other people of color, and it's
Yeah.
because of the British colonization. As I said, it's
No, it
that. But
is.
I
I mean,
love the
it's
culture. When
true.
Diwali happened, there were fireworks and everything as people celebrating it, which is really incredible.
It was, I mean, I think there's things that are British
Hmm.
that have Indian names, but they are not Indian. And it's just like, no, that's part of British culture, and dishes that, I mean, I didn't know, that are available in England. And now it's happening, similar kinds of things are happening in the United States. But yeah, it's several generations, even pre-independence.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's fascinating. I've only spent 20 hours in England once.
We need to increase
And
that. Need to
I
turn that
need
up. We've got a
to.
spare room. Tonya's going to be, we're planning
Oh
on
my
Tonya at
God.
some point over the next year or two, depending on when her life
I
allows for
would
it.
love to come
And we
say
got a
hello.
spare room.
Yes.
So it's anyone who we're friends with, sort of who's across the pond
Thank
or even
you.
in the UK, we're like, come on, we'll organise something. Come down. Don't just show up randomly one night
Of
in the
course.
rain and like, hello, podcasting. Do you remember what? Like, I haven't spoken to you in like 6 months. Obviously, in jest, and to any listeners, I'm not just saying it's an open door policy to anyone who's listening who finds my house, but we do have a guest room, and we're always saying to our American friends, come to the UK, just hang with
Yeah.
us for a bit, just pass by. Like that's what we love. And the food, as you were saying with India and stuff, it's just, I think the food is such a massive part of a lot of elements of British culture. And what me and Megan love doing is we want to have people around and feed them. And it's in
Right.
India, obviously, that's such a prevalent thing because curries are just next
Oh.
level.
That's another thing that, it's funny because the word curry does not exist in India because
Hmm.
everything is curry. So like we don't say like, what do you like curry? Or like, what kind of curry? What does that mean? And in India and in the US and maybe the Western world, I don't know, like people say curry, and I'm like, what do you mean? It's like it's such
It's just a
that's
blanket
not a
term.
it's a blanket term. It's like saying food. But I love that, It's
Yeah.
funny.
You go to
Yeah,
good.
thank you. And I hope the same thing, for you as well and Megan. And I'm actually trying to manifest living on my own, so that I can welcome people from everywhere, Yeah.
It's a joy. It's one of
It
those.
is
And
good.
when you go traveling, and because Megan's got friends across the world as well, which is just really fun. Them saying, "Oh, if you ever came here, we'd be able to see you." But I just remembered, before we delve into the Buddhism thing, when you
Oh,
mentioned
yeah,
about US being quite a young country, it's
yeah.
funny because when I hear in TV shows or like home makeover, certain things that are non-fiction or whatever, and you hear people go, "Oh yeah, this house is really old." Yeah, it's like 40, 50 years old. And I'm like, my house, it was bought that I bought like within this year. This house is built in the either 1920s or 1930s, and that's just kind of like a mid-level old house. You're like, yeah, this is a pretty old house. We have pubs in Southampton that are from the 1800s. We have pubs
Amazing.
in the UK that are older than the whole nation of America that are from like the 1600s. We have buildings that have the
Oh,
date they were built. And you go to America and it's like, oh yeah, this is really old. Older, 80 years. And it's like, we have like an abbey down the road from us that's been there since like 1100 like AD. It's like, it's just very
no, I
funny
know
when I
what
hear
is
about that.
old is just so funny. And even, I mean, the moment you're 10 years old here, like that's an achievement.
Because everything's so young.
It's like when you're a baby and like, parents who have babies and then they'll say, oh, they're 14 months, right? When you're counting in months.
Oh man. But yeah, it was lovely hearing about your trip to India, and I'm so glad it was great for you because I saw some of the pictures on Instagram as well
Oh,
of
oh,
like
yeah.
some of the cool things, and I was like, oh yeah, she went to India. I want to see some of the photos from there, and I just
And
think
part of it is,
nature.
I think, if you're part of an older culture,
Hmm.
even if you're younger, which I'm not saying I'm young, but I think that I realize that I have that oldness inside me. You reconnect with like this knowledge that's been there for hundreds and thousands of years. And so that's very comforting. That's
Hmm.
very, very comforting. And to know that, okay, you come from somewhere, because the reality of American immigration is a lot of people don't know where they come from, and because it was cut off, and it's only recently that people are in touch with their cultures, but a lot of people to assimilate, they lost where they'd come from. And a lot of people just say, oh, I'm Scottish and Irish, but they won't know a single thing about being Scottish or Irish, or they'll say I'm German or Italian, and then they feel like being American isn't a thing, because what is being American, which I argue it is a thing, because it's kind of a privilege to belong to an older culture, and have the sense of identity, because it's not an individual. It's also like, okay, my people come from it's a long thing, it goes back.
Trace the roots. Yeah, it's same
It
with
is.
the UK. I find one of the things that I enjoy the most. I'm not necessarily proud to be British. I'm thankful I am, because the place I've come in the
Right.
world and
Yeah.
where I am is one of the
Yeah.
easier lives. I have
Yeah.
free time enough to spend time not having to make money, but just to talk to people online. Whereas there's people across the world who are like, don't have that even close to that living comfort. So I'm very thankful to that I'm British and in this sort of place of privilege. But with being a British citizen, I'm like, I'm happy I'm here. We've got a lot of cool stuff, but like, when I go to certain museums and things, I hear about all the wars and how many times it's been conquered and things like that. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But one of my favorite things is architecture, and
Mm,
I love castles. I love going to old churches and
yes.
cathedrals. You go to Europe, you go to like, obviously Megan is Italian, so her
Yes.
family are in Italy, so it's good excuses to go over there. And they've got some of the most beautiful basilicas and churches and cathedrals and all kinds of stuff. And we went to Paris recently, went to Disneyland, but we went to Paris as well and went to St. Paul's Basilica, I think it is. So
Yeah.
whenever we go anywhere, it's always we want to see the architecture of places. And I know in
Yes.
a lot of Asia as well, there's a lot of like temples and other places there's like mosques and things. And some of those are, like I've said before, I don't necessarily believe in a god in that
Right.
sense, or a deity that controls everything. I believe in the energy of the universe. But the the buildings themselves convince me more of the possibility of there being a divine creator, because when you see some of these places and you see how old they are, and you're like, how on earth would you build that now? How do they build it before electricity and all these sort of safety things? They're like, yeah, we just got a rope and a plank of wood and we're going to pull you up and you're going to build a giant castle thing. And you're like, that kind of idea is more convincing to me there's a divine being than the doctrine itself, because I'm so wowed by it all. And obviously India as well has got so many beautiful
it goes
buildings.
back into like, BC and like before, and like, it's stuff that they don't know how it came about. Like you said, they just don't know. And some of it is technology that then got wiped out, right? Like the ancient civilizations that like in Egypt and China and, even Native American, like we don't know, it was ancient, but then they got wiped out and they're just remnants, and you're like, how did they do that? And yeah, I hope we don't wipe ourselves out as a planet. We're like on track to do that, but if that happens.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I've been thinking about like all my stuff digitally, and I'm like, I've got my OneDrive account, and I've got things saved on archive.org, and I've got things saved everywhere else online, and it's like, but what if the internet goes down completely? Yeah. It's like, where's all your podcasting gone? It's like, I have a business card that says I have a podcast, and I got a microphone, and that's about it. I've got like almost pretty much all the contacts that I have via podcasting. It's all digital. So it's like, if that went, it'd be like, I've got my notebooks. I write my notes in my notebook. So this conversation, I'll have the bullet points of vaguely what we may have spoken about.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the dinosaurs said, right?
Yeah, one more meteor, that's it.
I'm the same way. I don't like shopping. It's either it's the architecture in cities, which is something that I think America is just not remarkable. Like it's not in terms of architecture, but either that or what America is remarkable for is natural beauty. And what you were saying about Iceland and just going out there and mountains and rivers. And I think there's so much to see that's just so beautiful. And I won't get to see it in my lifetime, but I'd like to see as much as I can. And I like meeting the locals. Like, I think that's really wonderful. And, I don't like to do I can't afford it, the resort kind of situation where you just go to a resort in Jamaica. But hey, can you meet the people? Because the people are, incredible, and the foods are incredible.
That's what I found about Iceland, is the people specifically. I've never been anywhere everyone is so friendly, because in Iceland, you get people from across the world, and obviously people in Iceland speak Icelandic, which is a Scandinavian language, which is very difficult to learn. So they all just speak English as their second language. And then you get the other people from across the world. You get obviously Americans who speak English as well as English people, and Australians. But then you get other people from Europe, and their first language is French or anything like that. I saw some Asian individuals. I think they were speaking Japanese. They were over there, but they were speaking English. So you had all these people in this multicultural place, and I'm there like, everyone's talking my language. But it's so nice to have it, and everyone's just so friendly. And because Iceland is so expensive to get to, and it is an expensive place to buy anything, you don't get just lots of people going on, we call them stag do's, I think they're bachelor parties, where it's like, let's go to a cheap Spanish country and get wasted for 7 days. It's like, if you want to do that in Iceland, you are going to cost yourself a fortune. So you generally get, there's almost like this hurdle for places like Iceland, where it's like, because of the price, I think Switzerland a little bit like it as well, where it's so expensive. It's like, you don't get as many, they still happen, but you don't get as many people like taking advantage or not respecting the culture and things. And that's one of the things I love about Iceland. It's like, it's hard to get to, so let's go over there and hide from the other people.
I know. There was a time when a lot of people are going because the economy had crashed and the whole like bankruptcy, and so a lot of people are going, and then I think it's back to being expensive. Before I forget, there's this incredible comedian. I also binge watch stuff in India because I had nothing else to do. There's this incredible stand-up comedian called Ari Eljern. I'm going to put it in the chat. Oh, he is so funny. But if you want to know about anything about Iceland and how it stands separate from even Scandinavia and their country, oh gosh, he is hilarious. He's just a hilarious comedian. So he has a Netflix special, which is just fantastic. So now I really want to go to Iceland. And then, compared to India, where there are just so many people, I want to go to places where there aren't any people, and then people are forced to speak to each other, because there isn't thousands of people, So yeah, I definitely. Okay, now that's my next plan. Thanks, Mike Burton.
It's okay. Yeah, I recommend it. And also, here's a fun fact. In Iceland, there's lots of cool museums. I love museums. And there's a really cool tour. You can do the Golden Circle tour. You get to go see geysers, the tectonic plates that make up the island, and these giant waterfalls, gold frost. There's beautiful ones. But also, they have a really cheap, is one of the cheapest museums there, and I've been there. It's called the Museum of Phallology. It's the penis museum. It's amazing. They have, and you go in there, and there's lots of men and women in there. And when you've got the men in there, they're looking around quietly and looking at everything. And every person who I could see was a woman who was in there giggling. All of them laughing and pointing at stuff, because you've got all different animal stuff there. You've got like walrus ones in jars. There's horse ones. There's penis, even a hamster one that you have to get like a magnifying glass and go see. It's in Reykjavik, so it's not off the beaten path or anything. It's really easy to find. But I say to anyone, Megan's mum went to Iceland recently, because I think in part because of my recommendation, and I told her to go there, so she went there as well and thought it was hilarious. It's not very big. You'll be there for maybe even an hour at a push, but it's quite cheap, and I've never been to a museum like it. It's just so funny.
Okay, wow, you have given me so many dreams.
That's it. Do a Europe world tour, go to Iceland, then come to the UK, and the UK will be a cheap trip because we'll give you boarding, and then everything in the UK is within a few hours drive of itself.
My first cousin lives in Oxford, so
I love Oxford. It's one of my favorite cities in the UK. The museums there are my favorite.
It's so beautiful, and my cousin's husband works there. And the only thing is, I don't want to and I have friends in London as well, so it's not, but I just don't like to get stuck in Oxford, because if you get stuck there, then you'll never get to see London. And especially being a theater artist, like I want to be able to do West End. I want to be able to do. I just want to do the tourist stuff too. The big eye. What's it called?
The London Eye. Yeah,
the London Eye.
Also got the Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so all of that stuff, I love to do.
It's amazing. It's a lot of fun. I love living in the UK. It's got lots of great things. And I love Southampton because it's about 2 hours from London, so it's really easy to get there and go to, like, if there's big gigs. But we've got one of the biggest theatres as well. So we get almost all the tours that play from the West End when they start touring. Pretty much always come to Southampton. Yeah.
Oh, yes, great. I don't know why I missed that. We were talking about Southampton, but I was like, oh.
Well, it's one of those places I don't expect many American individuals, people outside of the UK to know, because it's kind of known in the UK, but not outside as much. We get the Titanic came by here, and that worked out great. Went from Plymouth to here, I think, and then we've got a lot of cool things. It's quite busy and a lot of shopping and stuff, but it's right near the New Forest.
Indians there?
Yes, yeah, a lot of Polish individuals and Indians. There's lots of it's a multicultural place, especially because where it's on the docks as well. It's easy because we're an island. You can just go from anywhere in Europe really to Southampton for the most part. So yeah, it's very multicultural. I've never been anywhere and not seen various people of color. Yeah.
That's cool. I feel like the whole London, England area is a different kind of multiculturalism than in the United States, because the United States is so far to the west that it's still multicultural. But, when I went to Dubai and England, it's a different multiculturalism. Like, you get people from, Africa I don't see a lot of people from Africa, in the United States, or like people from Australia, New Zealand, like, that, like the Commonwealth, that part, you'll see more in Dubai, and you'll see more in England and the UK than, so it's a different kind of multiculturalism. In fact, probably more multicultural in terms of international.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you go to places in Europe, it's slightly different as well. Like certain places in Europe have higher populations of certain demographics of people in this place or that place for a variety of different reasons. But yeah, it is interesting. But that's one of the fun things about traveling, is just seeing how different people are in different places, and it's how that affects the culture. And mainly for me, it's the food. It's like, oh, there's a lot higher population of Indian individuals here. Then there's going to be some amazing curry houses. Indian restaurants is the correct way, but everyone in the UK is like curry house. They have curries, so it's curry house. It's like, but the menu doesn't say curry pretty much anywhere. It's always, chicken balti, chicken boona, or any of these sorts of things.
And all of these names we don't even have in India. So I'm dying to have British, Indian, or curry. I'm dying to have that, because I don't think I have had that.
It's not the same. I know that Indian curry is like a lot spicier, and I think the flavors are a lot more intense, but they've basically had to water everything down for the weak British taste buds who can't handle too much heat.
Which is great, because I don't like a lot of chili, so maybe I'll vibe with that,
There's a lot of options. I could just talk about curry all day. Or food. It's just, that's one of the things I love about traveling and going away and seeing family as well, because Megan's family are Italian. So you go there and
Oh,
all they do is just feed you, and you just get
yeah.
espressos before and after every meal if you want. They drink wine whenever, like not when they're working, but when we go over there, generally people aren't working,
No,
and then you go there, and Megan's grandma, her nonna, makes us like, okay, get ready for a 6-course meal. And it's like, wow, it's just food after food after food. It's like, oh, they like me because I eat a lot. So it's
that's a manja thing. It's same thing with Indians, but I'd love to go to Italy. Yeah, my ex was from Barcelona, and so again, it was always table wines always there,
Mhm.
and it's like food, and then there's midday, beers, and it's fantastic. It's good way to live.
It is. And so I want to
Yeah,
talk about a few of the elements that we spoke about. We touched on in the last episode.
sure.
In my intro, I'll probably have mentioned, I should have done it at the very start, but in the intro, I will have mentioned about just people checking out the previous episode, because it gives a good overview of your journey with Buddhism and the sort of a lot of elements of what makes you who you are. You very kindly, openly spoke with us about. So I want to ask about some of the elements of Buddhism. I did a bit of research myself, and there's just some intriguing parts of it that I found. So one part that I found quite interesting is obviously karma. Everyone generally has an idea of the broad ideas of karma, but I found it quite interesting that it's part of this cyclical rebirth, and you're basically just doing it almost eternally until you then reach nirvana, essentially, and that's when you kind of transcend it. So with you and your kind of how you interact with Buddhism, how do you view ideas such as karma and those sort of things? And did you have them before Buddhism or after, or how has Buddhism changed it? Like, what was your relationship with the idea of things like karma?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a big question because karma is it's such a common word in India,
Hmm.
because the majority of that population is Hindu, and karma is a big thing, and cause and effect. This idea that yeah, you're karmic, and in Hinduism it functions in a slightly different way because it's functions in acceptance slash fatalism. So, oh, I did something good in my previous lifetime, that's why I'm here living in San Francisco, in first world country, or I never really grew up in poverty, but I've done something bad in my lifetime, so oh yeah, I that's why I have asthma, or it's that kind of it functions like that. And
Hmm.
and in a more darker note, it also functions to say, oh, that's why, people who are lower castes, or, poor, or are not fortunate, is, they didn't do the right thing. But in this lifetime, if you create good causes, then in the next lifetime you might be born a Brahmin, or you might have better economic circumstances, or and so it really it functions sometimes. And Hinduism is hard to say because there isn't one book or one thing. It's just many books, many stories, and there's so many different ways that you could be Hindu, but there's also like really disturbing aspects, and caste system and patriarchy is tied into it. So that was but there is always, being Indian, this profound sense of like karma, that, cause and effect, cause and effect. Um, it it didn't seem to explain things for me when I was younger, and also people, it didn't seem like people are trying to be better human beings. What in fact people are trying to do is go to a temple and offer priests some money to do prayers for them. I didn't see a lot of people that I thought were mindful people. And then I had this question of, nirvana didn't make sense to me, this idea of you keep being born. And that's also in Hinduism and in some parts of Buddhism, but it's not, certainly not in the Buddhism that I practice, that, because I think in all of these, they'll call the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, the idea is that life is suffering,
Hmm.
and that nirvana is like the absence of existence somehow is freedom or nirvana. Um, it didn't make sense to me somehow. And I'm still like, I don't know, what is infinity? Like, what is infinity? Is there no boundary? I don't understand, like, how the universe, what is infinity? And I also don't understand what is non-existence. And I guess I'll find out when I die, you know. I mean, I don't know. But there's some things that I can't wrap my head around. But I certainly had a lot of anxiety around that, and I certainly didn't believe in an afterlife, which is, um, so when I encountered this particular Buddhism, which is Sokagakkai Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism, and it's based on the, almost the last teachings of the Buddha, where what he was doing essentially, if I understand correctly, again, I'm not an expert, I practice it, but I'm not a theoretician or a historian.
This is your
But
interpretation. That's fine.
it's my, yeah, and it's what I understand is that he attained enlightenment in his 30s, like 32, and then he preached for about 40 years. And then when he was in his early 70s, he was like, okay, life is finite. I'm not going to last a long time. I want to cut the crap and tell you what it's like. He was just pussyfooting around, this idea that um, the reality of life. And he was, because he was functioning in a Brahminical society where, there was a caste system and patriarchy. And so he said, I don't know, an evil person may not, be able to attain enlightenment, or a woman may not be able to attain enlightenment. I think it's because of our menstrual cycles, because we go up and down. I don't know what it was that women can attain enlightenment. And he hadn't addressed that. But finally, in his seventh decade, he said, I don't have enough time. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the truth is. And that's considered the Lotus Sutra. And he said that, one, everybody's a Buddha and, has that potential inside them. And guess what? You've had this potential in your whole life forever. Like, you don't have to get anywhere to become enlightened. It's just in you. You just have to uncover it, and he said that, karma, that life is not suffering is suffering. And so earthly desires are suffering, but they're also enlightenment. And so to give you an example, like my journey with asthma, for example, is like, oh my God, I suffer so much. And then when I started practicing Buddhism and chanting, I just realized, wow, it's my teacher. Asthma is my teacher. And I started to pay attention to, what could I notice about my life, and learn so many things about myself and where that asthma came from, what are things that trigger my asthma. It had so much to do with my maybe early childhood experiences, anxiety. And as I had hope that it would change. I explored different things and started to use my voice for creative means and to bring joy to people, and, even for counseling. And I truly believe that because of the fact that I use my lungs for good, that my lungs healed. And unless the AQI is above 300 in Delhi, like, I don't use my inhaler. But it wasn't about me overcoming asthma. It was about, I no longer let asthma control me. And a lot of people who say that, even who have terminal illness, will tell you that, that it's not the thing that's happening to us that causes us to suffer. It's suffering that causes us to suffer. And so karma in Nichiren Buddhism, or Soka Gakkai is Buddhism, which you can find on, sgi-usa.org or buddhability.org, is this idea that, there's so much joy to be found, in life, and that life is, and that actually nirvana is not non-existence. It's that when life ceases to be full of suffering. So you will continue to face obstacles, because that's what it means to be human. And birth, aging, sickness, and death, that's what the Buddha said. That happens to everybody, and there's suffering connected to that at any time. And we suffer individually and we suffer collectively, like we do with war, violence, pandemic, whatever it is, sometimes globally, sometimes. So we have karma that's individual. Like, why did I grow up in a certain family and not somebody else? But there's karma that's collective, like, and, and then there's Indian karma and British karma, immigrant karma, and then there's gender karma and, LGBTQ karma, like there's collective. But no matter what, Buddhism says you can be happy in this moment when you realize that you are the Buddha and that you can actually change your life. So it's a very activist form of Buddhism. And the idea is that happiness lies in not just striving for your own happiness, but realizing that you are on this planet to bring other people joy, and so your podcast, for example, I'm sure brings you a lot of joy, but there's also a sense of like, you're bringing other people joy by this genuine chit chat, and that through your own desire to speak, there's a melding of your own desire and you're giving back. And because you're doing that, there's joy to be found. So I think we call it practice for self and others. So that's the Buddhist idea. And I don't know what happens after death, but I think Buddhism aligns with science, like energy is neither created nor destroyed. So the idea is that, yeah, you are reborn. In what form, what way? You may be reborn in two bodies and one body. And I don't know, but Buddhism, as opposed to Hinduism, says this life is important. this is the only one you will remember. And karma does transfer. So do what you can to make this lifetime productive, like that's the only. So it's not about living in the future of, and this moment is important. So while I'm looking to have like a beautiful retirement in the future, or to like have a beautiful, I'm dreaming dreams for 5, 10, 30 years. Am I happy today, being myself, in this, in my particular body and circumstances? And so Buddhism will say, are you happy today? Just as you are. And I think that's what made my trip in India also so beautiful. I felt like my family, and I really struggled with my family a lot, like in terms of harmony. And I went back, and after 3.5 years of like chanting and growing, and I feel like I changed and I learned to embrace my family. And so, that we had the most beautiful time. But I don't think they changed. They're still the same, but I changed, and so it was really great. So Buddhism will say, yeah, like, who are you and how can you change? I don't know. It's a big answer to.
It's what I wanted. Is exactly when I was
doing. It's very practical. So my Buddhism is we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and if I need to get a haircut and I'm worried about it, I chant. When I read a disturbing report about what's happening in Iran, I chant. When the air pollution is high, members in India were chanting. And then 2 days later, the chief minister said, "We're going to do," he actually did something. So we chant for everything, but eventually the prayers become larger and larger. And the idea is that if everybody is happy, empowered, and looking out for other people, the world will become peaceful. And we as a world love to elect people that are insane. Yes. Don't you think? Like, who are the people over here that we've elected? Right? Like Putin is insane. He's legitimately insane. Like Syrian authority, insane. Iranians, insane. Taliban, insane. Modi, I'm probably going to get lynched. Insane. These guys are like Trump, insane. They're megalomaniacs, but we love to elect them to power, and so the world will change when everybody grows, like let's elect the right people. Let's value education, health workers, and not people who are just, making money out of money. I mean, America is right now, tech is devastated after they made so much money off of the pandemic. And now suddenly they appointed this, Elon Musk is insane. He has a mental issue. And now he's laying off people and destroying lives. And then Jeff Bezos is destroying his lives. And Google is destroying lives, saying that they're going to lay off people that are not functioning as well. So they're destroying reputations. This is not okay. And, if you just value life, your own and other people's, like, it's not that hard. It is not that hard. But yeah, we're just taught wrong. So all of that is Buddhism, and it makes sense to me. And I've been able to flourish individually because of that. I used to feel like I was the unluckiest person in the universe, and now I feel full of fortune, So, yeah.
It's incredible. And I find there's so many things that you said there that we could jump off, but it was like, one of the things I found when I was looking up things about Buddhism was all the different interpretations. Well, not interpretations, but obviously, I mean, with religion, there are interpretations, there are different sects, there are different, ways of grouping together certain ideas within an organized religion. And so I did find that when I was looking at karma, there were certain elements that, were not quite contradictory, but as you say, like different ways of viewing it and different ways of kind of thinking, what parts of the Buddha's teaching are we going to put to the forefront, in a sense?
Right.
And one of the things I've picked up was with karma, it said, samsara was like wandering world, which I found was interesting. But then one of the things that put me off a little bit, as what kind of one of the things you were alluding to, was that the cyclical rebirth is, I believe is dukkha. I may be pronouncing it incorrectly, and it means unsatisfying, and it's just that thing. And I was like, I don't feel that.
Dukkha, yeah,
dukkha, there you go.
Which means, which literally means
Dukkha. Yeah. So it's like this thing where you're just like, life is suffering. And it was like, when I read that, I was like, that was something that I do not agree with in myself. I'm like, it can be, but I think life is, a lot of it is about perspective. And I think a lot of the things that you've been saying with Buddhism in your journey, especially with the chanting and things, is like, you look at it if you look at it from a purely analytical perspective, there could be a very staunch atheist, and I used to be like this when I was a teenager, who would be
Right.
like, prayers don't do anything or chanting doesn't do anything. But when you look really into it, it's like, okay, but meditation does. That's been scientifically proven that meditation does help someone. So chanting or praying or however people want to kind of interpret their feelings inside and how they want to kind of just communicate with the universe in their own way,
Right.
that in itself, without any external factors to consider,
Yes.
is beneficial to that person. And that's one thing that I think that is something that a lot of people who are atheists don't get to grips with in a lot of ways. And where I've become more open-minded to a lot of things, and what I now meditate and things like that, I just use breathing exercises and things, and it helps me sleep and it helps me calm down in certain scenarios. My quality of life has just gone up slightly. So if someone finds that praying to a god, you have to vocalize what you're feeling. That's what prayer is. And that's a form of therapy. That, with chanting, it's basically you're saying these words over and over again, and they bring you this kind of comfort, and your mind is free to think in a more free, casual way. It kind of, I don't know specifically with chanting, but for me, I find with meditation and prayer, it blocks out the noise of the rest of the world. So then it makes your experience more beneficial, and then that will radiate to every being you interact with, will be, in theory, a slightly more beneficial, a slightly more positive interaction. And if that keeps happening, as you say, it spreads and spreads and spreads. It's a ripple effect.
It is. It really is. And yeah, I mean, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo in particular is all about like getting in touch with yourself and communing and dialoguing with oneself and the universe. And you can concretely say, this is what we talk about having a vow or a determination, like this is what I determined to change, universe, get in line with my wishes. And and it comes about. But for that, you have to change too. Like if I chant for a happy, harmonious family and I'm angry myself, like we're not trying to change anybody outside, because it's in here. And so quiet. And so it can be a meditative, quiet space. If you need to calm yourself down, it can be a space that gets you revved up and energized. It can, it can be anything. It can be, I actively, when I'm hopeless about the world, I chant. And I chant to, for my prayers to reach people, that are suffering. And, and yeah, it's just all kinds of things, but it's all good. You're sending good energy out and bringing good energy in. And, human beings are powerful, that way. And it's peaceful. But I had a hard time with the concept of God. And I still do, because first of all, the one person, and then, of course, India has like a millions, but then, so which one do you, and then like, okay, well, single gender or like what? And then it disempowers you. And it doesn't answer a question like, why do bad things happen?
Yep.
It doesn't answer that question. Why do bad things happen to good people? It just doesn't answer any of those questions. So yeah, I'm so glad that meditation is, working for you, because if you're happy and chilled out, then you spread joy in the world. And that's how it works. And sometimes you need courage. The truth is that to do big things, we need courage and we need wisdom. And so, yeah, and there are millions of noises and sounds and people telling us what to do. And some people are naturally born with the ability to listen to their voices, but some, we just need to calm down and just listen. What's my voice? Where do I want to go?
It's your instincts in a lot of ways, the gut feeling, intuition. There's lots of different words for it, but it's all that kind of, you just get a sense of where to go. And I've been trying to follow that a lot over the last sort of 5 years, especially. I've made a specific effort to really go, what is it that I actually want at this scenario? But even just this micro things, just like, what do I feel like is right at this moment? What is kind of something is nudging me? It's my subconscious. I don't know. Is it my soul if I believe in one? Is it God if I believe in one? And when you say like all the different gods, I'm just always like, for me with nature and the way everything is this cyclical, death creates life and you scale up. The human system is created by billions, if not trillions of bacteria. I think it's like billions. So the way we function is by millions or billions of microorganisms within us. Well, you zoom out, and then what is a forest? It's the same. Well, you zoom out. What's a continent? What's an earth? What's the galaxy? And you zoom out and out and out, and it just becomes this thing where I think everything is kind of, it's an even playing field. There's not really, even humans who are destroying a lot of the natural world and things, and that kind of imbalance. Without us doing all those things, all the predators and prey and everything kind of does even itself out. You can't make a mountain without digging a hole. You know, it's that sort of concept. And so I find when I zoom out, I'm just like, if there's a general energy controlling the universe, I don't think it's a physical singular being that's doing it. I think it's that the united consciousness of every living being comes together and makes this ebb and flow, makes this global, universal, galaxy-wide consciousness. And that's just the vague thing. It's like, what's the purpose of life? Well, it just kind of happened, but we were, in theory, all this one point of energy, and then it kind of zoomed out, and then it kind of popped, almost the Big Bang or whatever. And however you want to think about it, we all are made from the same matter. We all come from the same thing. So our connection to each other and our ability to create thought, we all have that to some degree, and we're all made of the same kind of this matter.
Yeah.
So it's
so beautiful. You know, it's such a beautiful thing. And I think that sometimes when you have a concept of God, I think human beings need to externalize. You need to have something outside of yourself to focus on. And, so that, I understand how God came into being, but the over focus on God as one thing external has has distanced us from that. The God-like thing, the consciousness, the power is everywhere, and it's in everything, and we're all connected. We actually distance ourselves from nature, distance ourselves from our fellow human beings, distance ourselves from, just this universe by focusing on that God. And it's disturbing. And in Buddhism, actually, we say that the gods will, if you wake up the universe in your own life, the gods will come in, they'll protect you, because the gods are other people that are positive functions, or the waterfall is a god, like the weather is a god. Like, so God is just like, when you're in rhythm with the universe, like, as opposed to fighting with it, and the universe is for life, like life is rewarded, then all the gods will help you. So the gods are like right there to serve you, and not in an arrogant way. That sounds arrogant. I don't want to give disrespect to somebody who believes in God, but it's, this idea that they're with you, and that you have that same power, and everybody else will become a positive function. But that I do like Hinduism and Greek mythology for the reason that I love that gods mythology. Just have, right? Like, and even in Hinduism, it's the same thing. Gods are good or evil, they mess with you. They have human-like qualities. They mess up. And I like that concept. That's of God, Yeah, they're powerful, but they're also assholes sometimes.
Definitely in Greek mythology. You look at Zeus and you're like, what are you doing? Not Zeus from the Hercules Disney movie, which is a cracking movie. Not a good representation of what Zeus is actually like. He likes to put his dick in everything and kills people for no reason. That's Zeus. Makes for entertaining stories. Not someone you want to follow necessarily, but his stories about them, mythology, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's like really fun, these stories. I think when you radicalize them, and they become like, you fundamentalize, and that's when it becomes problematic. And
I love the mythology side of, like, religion in itself. I think is very intriguing to me. Religion has always been an intrigue to me. And I went to Catholic primary school. Neither of my parents are very religious. They're both kind of agnostic. But Mum would pray when things got bad. But I think that was more her kind of calling it to the universe, not a specific God. But when it comes to how, with my interpretations of a lot of religion and stuff, I can't remember if I said it when we last spoke, but I just think that all religion has kind of got a piece of the puzzle. Science has got a lot of pieces of the puzzle as well, but I think that they're just a lot of philosophies and religions and scientific ideas and things. There's just this one big picture, and the picture is like the size of like a block of apartments, and each religion has got, and each bit of science has got like a handful of pieces. And it's like, we've got the answers, we're figuring out. And then if you put all the pieces we have together right now, you'd be lucky if you got the corners done. I just think there's so much beyond what we as humans are at the moment can even comprehend as to what's happening. And one thing, when I speak to people, I know you don't fall in this camp, but when I speak to people who are less spiritual, and I wouldn't class myself as a spiritual person, I'm more of a scientific-minded person, I try and rationalize things through the eyes of science. And I go, okay, you don't believe there's anything outside of what we can see. Well, how come there's a dog whistle? How come
Yeah.
bees seem to somewhat react to sounds and things and potentially Wi-Fi signals and other stuff that we can't detect? Wi-Fi we know exists. We know when you have a Wi-Fi router in your house, something happens in the air and then you have the internet. There is a data transfer happening, but you can't see it or detect it without certain things. And if you do think about all the things that we know, what to measure and how to convert it into a manner of us understanding it, you think about how much is there that we have no idea how to see. Like if you're born without sight, you can't visualize vision. So if
Yeah.
we're not born with certain senses, there's no way to us even to know what we're not getting, if you know what I mean.
It's so true. And that's what's bothersome, right? About the state of the world and certainly the state of a lot of like the United States, but I would say India as well. Like that this discomfort and fear of the fact that we don't know a lot and that everybody just doesn't, this anti-science movement, in America, for example, or that we don't know enough. And um, yeah, I think it's so exciting to know that we don't know and that, you know, like from my Buddhist perspective, we're reborn in 200, 300 years. Like, whoa, what? And not just technology, but what do we not know? Like we still don't know that where life exists in another planet. And it's just not possible that we're the only planet with life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. So what is there? And is there another way of communicating, other than, like you said, now I'm going to be thinking about that all day, other than our like five senses, right? The sixth and seventh sense. Like, what is it? And how do we communicate? And is there a way that, of communicating that goes beyond, these five senses or email or phone? And what are we going to not just what are we going to discover about ourselves as human beings? And I just heard this term psychonaut, with like
Mm-hmm.
astronaut but psychonaut, which is
Yeah.
like, exploring the mind. And I think that's so exciting, and becoming a psychonaut and getting curious. I have a life coach and she keeps introducing me to these things. I mean, there's all these things where, people are not doing something called holotropic breathing, where through breathing you can see your previous life or wake up to certain things that trauma had closed off to, or remember memories from another time. And I was like, whoa, I like what, like there's so many mysteries of the mind. And besides the fact there's mysteries out in the universe and life that we don't know anything about. So yeah, I mean, we're so small and our thoughts are small, so small. And I hope we can be curious. And as a human being, that is like, as I get older, I do notice a tendency to, like for me to just be lazy, and be metaphorically in my pajamas forever and not and watch Netflix and not read a book. But I do want to keep being curious and learning and never shut that. Yeah, just keep thinking, wow, there's so many things to learn and new things to learn. So I don't shut myself off to anything, I'm like, yeah, bring it on. It might be hokey, but bring it on. I just am curious. And then I could say, no, it's not for me. But in terms of religion, I would never have said that I'm religious. Maybe even a decade ago, I would say I'm spiritual. But now I just embrace being like, off, practicing Buddhist. And mostly I'm a practitioner. But yeah, whatever, I'm religious. But religion just has that weird name. And I'm like, religion exists to serve people, it exists to serve people. We don't exist to serve religion. It's a way that it's something we use to make our lives better, But if it doesn't serve you, there's no reason to pray, or if it doesn't serve you, it makes your life better, do it, And so, yeah, but I don't get being religious because you are born into a religion like that. Sorry, that's no, everybody should choose what they choose to believe in. And if you want to say there's no God, it's your right. Or there's like, I don't want to believe in anything, that's your right. If you want to say there's 10,000 gods, then go ahead. But for heaven's sakes, don't be a dick in the world and like don't be violent in the name of religion. That's like not okay. That is not okay. I'm reading this beautiful book by this Afghan. She was the youngest mayor in Afghanistan. Her name is Zarifa Garafi, and she's kind of like Malala Yousafzai, kind, just incredible. And you really read that book, and she talks about how Afghanistan has the most liberal form of like Islam, but then it got co-opted, by certain traditions. And of course, Taliban, what it did to Islam. And it's like, wow, Islam is the religion of peace, according to how she practices. But then you look at the way the Taliban practices it, and like, what the fuck is that? Like, so, we just, human beings speak, let your actions speak for your religious faith, like that's what I say. I don't trust, yeah, that's it. I'll trust any religion, and people of all faiths are good and bad.
Yeah, it's I feel like religion is a way to try and translate what the world is giving you to how you can have some sort of impact in it. Because I feel like if people think that God specifically spent time creating them, that they feel like they have a purpose, they have a being that created you to live gives you a reason to try. And I think a lot of people have the struggle where if they don't have a religious system or a specific lifestyle or some sort of element of them, and I'm not saying, like, for me, it's probably podcasting is mine, because I'm like, I need to talk to different people and I need to talk so much and I want to absorb all these other ideas, but I want a bit of everything. The way I get through this is by spending my free time talking to people. The way that other people do it is they are very religious. They study religious texts. Other people read loads of books. Some people paint. I think it's just, as you say, like, religion for me, I don't think holds necessarily much more weight in someone's, or it shouldn't hold much more weight in someone's personality, because at the end of the day, it's just a way for you to perceive the world. It's your way of understanding what anything is. It's like a stepping stone. It's just like, okay, I don't understand the universe. I don't understand why people do all these things, but I've got this vague foundation of understanding that comes from religion or spirituality or something else. And from that basis, I'm going to kind of find my own way. And I think that all religions and all spirituality start off, or at least in theory, from a good place. And it's meant to be, here's how people should live. And then you get people who get either the translation, because things like the Bible have been translated like so many times. It's like, what are the translations wrong? Are people interpreting it wrong? There's just things in the times, which are, when it was originally conceived like 2,000 odd years ago, there's so many different parts of it which are imperfect because of humans, of doctrine and things. But it's just like the core values of most religion is just try and be good to each other. And then if you do that, generally speaking, everyone then just kind of works out. If you're not trying to fuck your neighbor over and he's not trying to do the same to you, you'll probably be all right with each other if you can just talk stuff out. And you scale that up and it gets more and more complicated, obviously, and this isn't just an easy solution. But if every scale up that you do per percentile, it just becomes more and more complicated, and then you get a couple of bad apples for one reason or another, and then it spirals a bit, and it's just us trying to have that conscious good that most, if not all, people have to a degree, and trying to make that the kind of driving force to your life without making your life just miserable. Because that's another thing I read online about Buddhism to a degree, which was one of the ideas that I think with certain parts of Buddhism is that you shouldn't be too hedonistic, but in the same token, you also shouldn't have too much, pronouncing this is wrong, asceticism. Which asceticism, I didn't know what that word was. And that means don't just not enjoy anything. Don't give yourself to Buddhism to such a degree that you don't eat any chocolate and you don't have any time to chill. Don't do it so you sleep on the bare minimum, eat barely anything, because your entire rest of your existence is purely living Buddhism. It's like, no, don't do that. But also don't just be a glutton and eat food and do nothing.
That's also not even Buddhism, to not enjoy life, like I would argue.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the ideas of that, where there's certain practices of Buddhism that specifically say, don't overindulge, but don't underindulge. You need to have a happy medium of moderation.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And there's so many things that you said now I'm trying to remember. I should write notes. But yeah, I think so. I mean, just be, I think it's a combination. And also when you're ascetic, you distance yourself and you escape the world, and there is no happiness outside of this world, and that you're actually being selfish. And it's not about selfish, like your happiness exists also in giving back. And so when you avoid and say, I'm just going to be in my little cocoon, I don't think it's a way to be truly enlightened, because so much of joy and happens in giving back, and you can't create value. Like one of the central tenets of Buddhism is also creating value. Like, so Buddhism doesn't say why did this happen, or, like, yeah, shit happens, but now what can I do with this, and how can I create value and spread that light? So I think that's also really important. I do want to, of course, acknowledge, and I know that you meant this in this way, that you and I, like, for example, are very privileged. And so
Hmm.
we can we can talk about being a good person, but some people are not able to be good people, or they're because their circumstances are so challenging. And I'm thinking specifically about America and how much gun violence there is. Of course, guns in America is a big issue. There are 3 guns to one person, but there's so much also violence, and it comes from lack of mental health care, lack of a healthcare system, where people can get mental health care, drugs, the war on American youth and people with drugs. There is a loneliness and isolation. Community isn't built up as much, so it builds like a pressure cooker, and then toxic masculinity, right? Where young men are the ones shooting people, mass shooting, and it's like because men don't express their feelings. So it's a whole system operates, and in order to be peaceful, I think Gandhi said this, like, you can't be nonviolent if you're embattled in your heart. So it has to be a spiritual revolution to even heal yourself first before you can smile at your neighbor. And so I think that these are bigger things. And so those of us who are in relatively stable lives, I think we have an extra responsibility, and it's a joyful responsibility to smile at our neighbors and not be, selfish fuckers, so, because somebody in, like, I'm just reading about Afghanistan so much, and is not able to because their whole family is decimated. Maybe they do have extra anger, right? Like, maybe they do have extra pain and grief, and they just need to land a job and become safe. But and maybe they don't. Like, this woman, Zarifa Ghaffari, is amazing. The most difficult life circumstances, and she turns out to be this incredible activist and peace activist, and so some people are extraordinary. But, I think it's also like, if you're able, like, do something good and it'll make your life better. Like, it's not something that, oh, like, give back. Honestly, you become happier when you do something in community, with somebody else. So that's, I think, definitely something I wanted to say. And I know you have to go to dinner, but I wanted to ask you one question
Yeah, go ahead.
before you leave, because it's always intrigued me. And I went from being not agnostic. I didn't know the word agnostic when I was a teenager, but I would say I'm atheist because I didn't believe in God. So um, I went from being atheist to being Buddhist, where I got a very well-formed idea of the universe and how things work and karma. Um, and so I wanted to know, like, what does it mean, like, to, like, I would think that one should believe in something, whatever that is, but it's an organizing principle, like a life philosophy. So what is it? What are alternative ways to, like, not believe in God or not be an IST, like something ist, a Buddhist, or like,
Hmm.
and because I feel like one should not believe in nothing. One should have some sort of belief, like human beings have the ability to do good, or I have the power. So what is it that, say, for example, you believe in, or that you've seen different people believe in, that's alternative?
I think there's a variety of different things that other people believe in. I think myself, generally, I have a lot of aligning principles with Buddhism. I don't necessarily align myself with any specific religion. I just kind of pick and
Right.
choose what I want from each. But it is the general idea of trying to mix science with spiritualism, so that so for my own self, I'm just like, I'm not one for faith, if I'm completely honest with you. I've never connected
Yeah.
with the idea of faith, because it's what the parents used to be like. Do this. Why? Because I told you. So I just have to trust that you know what's best for me. That's what I didn't jive with. And when I've kind of developed in things and grown up, I've kind of got this more idea of, I don't have faith in this thing, but I have more hope, and I want and the desire to do so. And so I think that my own desire and drive, mixed with the hope that things will work out in this way, I just try my best in relatively every situation. It's really, I try and stack up the positive and negative. And in my life, I've found that the more positive things, the more nice things I do for people, the better I am to others. that generally just makes my life better. So as you can be selfless to be selfish. So I kind of view that if you're going to be someone who is an atheist and you don't believe in a God or anything like that, or a strict morality system or anything along those lines, that's fine, as long as you have the principle that you just generally, as you said right at the start of our conversation, you just want to make your life and everyone's lives around you slightly better. And just like have the idea that when you die, there'll be nice things and people will be sad at your funeral. I think about my funeral quite a lot, because obviously
Me too.
it's like with the death that I've seen in my family life and stuff, it's something that I went to 3 funerals in 2 years for 3 close family members, and obviously more in the rest of my life as well.
Passing early too.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like with all that happening, I've thought about my funeral, and that kind of has driven me to be like, hey, do I want my friends to be like, you could always count on Mike, and he'd always be there if you need him, and he would try his best to solve your problems when he could? Or do you want it to be like, yeah, he kind of bailed out of a lot of stuff. They wouldn't say this at a funeral, obviously, but have very horrible friends if they said this at a funeral, but like thinking like, oh, he didn't really show up for this, or he didn't really do that, or he didn't help when he could. I'm not saying you break your back to help people, but it's just doing almost 10% more than you kind of want to for almost every task normally makes your life better. If you want to do more chores, if you want to make more food for people coming and you think maybe I should make a little bit more food, if you want to just like your friend's moving and it's like, it's such a boring crap job to help someone move. But if you just go, look, I've got a car, I'll come over for an hour. You get an hour of my time. That small thing means a lot to that person, even though it's quite a big inconvenience to you. And I don't say I say yes to everything, because that would be insane. And there's a film about it with Jim Carrey. But it's one of those things where I just try to give enough good while also looking out for what's best for me. Sometimes I just like, I want to have ice cream and watch nothing, and that's fine, and I do that. But other times I'm like, I want to really put work into my podcast. I really want to do that. And I just think with my idea of scaling out and energy and every living being being to a degree important and balanced in this world, it's just like moderation mixed with positivity, like optimistic moderation. I think that kind of describes my look on life. You can do a bit of everything for the most part, but don't do too much of one thing, and try and be optimistic with things. When you're in a relationship, try your best when it's right, but also don't be unrealistic and stuff. I used to describe myself as an optimistic pessimist, which was, I hope for the best, but I expect the worst, because
I'm a bit like that too.
Yeah, how one has to prepare. So there are lots of other things that I could delve down, and we will in our next conversation of other ideas, but that's kind of my morality philosophy, less so than my universal creation philosophy, which is much more linked with energy.
It's it's something you can pass on, right, to your children or nieces or nephews or coworkers. It's a philosophy, and there isn't a point of having a value system if you don't practice it. And it seems like you are, and I love this idea from everything that you've said, like yes to everything. That it's like a living document, that our value system is also a living document, that we can, that it's not something that's etched in stone because somebody told me, or it is because, but, it's growing and changing, and
adapting,
and that we live and learn. It's adapting. And, faith certainly is like, faith in what? And I think faith in ourselves, or in the, goodness of somehow that things will turn out okay. But I love what you said about hope, that it's not just like empty hope, but hope is also a commitment that I'm going to work to make this world a better place. And that doesn't mean I have to start a nonprofit, but like in my daily actions, I'm just going to try to be good and do good, and, and be authentic. Like I used to do a lot of favors for people and then resent it because I didn't actually have the bandwidth, but I had felt the social pressure. And I'm like, no, what are ways in which I can also look out for myself and, put the oxygen mask myself on before I do that for somebody else. So it's being authentic and having faith that my choice, like that is faith, that my choice is the right choice. And and if it's wrong, I'll find out. Like somebody will tell me, but like, yeah, it's okay. And so, yeah, I thank you. That is so enriching for me.
Speaking with you has been incredibly enriching, and that's a perfect way to wrap things up. And what's great, didn't even go through half my notes. So that means 2023, you're coming on again. A few months' time, have more conversations like this. Just go wherever we kind of fancy, because the first half was about India and travel and culture, and the second half was about morality and philosophy, which is delightful. These are my favorite conversations, and it's you can just go off on one. And next time, I promise, we will do it, and I'll block off a specific 2 hours, and we'll be able to just go off the rails. We keep teasing with people. We keep dipping our toes into certain concepts, but
Right.
we will get there. We've just got plenty of time. But
And I need to
before
go to Iceland.
you
So
do, it's
maybe
incredible. And
next time I'm going to go to Iceland.
do it. It's incredible. My favorite place on earth. But
Yeah.
we'll wrap up here. I'll end the call. But
Yes.
before I do, tell people where they can find you. I'll make notes of Buddhability and some of the other things
Yes.
we spoke about in our prior conversation. But where people
Yeah.
can find you.
You can find me on Instagram, which is I believe it's at Radhika Rao 77. I'm just putting that in the chat for you so you can put it in the show notes. And then I have a website that I don't update that often, but it's certainly a way that you can get in touch with me, which is radhikarao.org. And I'm on LinkedIn. If you look for me, I think there's my name is pretty common. So there might be several Radhika Raos, but I think if you do Radhika Rao and do like actor or communications coach or I went to Harvard, if that's helpful, like you'll find me somewhere. I live in San Francisco, so those kind of markers, you'll find me.
And I'll put all the details in the show notes. But
Yeah.
Radhika, we could talk all evening, but
All
alas, this last time it was you had commitments, and this time it's me.
Yeah.
So next time, neither of us will. But it's just thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been delightful as always to speak with you about all these things. This will be coming out about 2 weeks before Christmas, I think, or the holiday season. So I wish you the best of that as well. But just thank you. It's always delightful speaking with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy. Merry Christmas is my Christmas present to myself and I look forward to doing this in person sometimes in our bathrobes and you're drinking wine, someday that would be great. And Megan and just like we should have like a little robe party. Like that would be great. Pontificating the mysteries of the universe over alcohol.
Do it. That's it. We'll put that out into the universe, and that's a tease
Thank
for the
you.
listeners. Fantastic.
All right. Take care.